What if missing your last bus meant more than just being stranded? What if stopping to help someone you've never met turned into the moment that changed your life forever? On a freezing night in a forgotten corner of town, an elderly woman stood lost beneath a flickering streetlight. Hundreds passed by. Not one soul stopped, until an 18-year-old black teen, facing eviction, with nothing but a rusted bicycle, chose to act. He thought he was simply helping her get home. What he didn't know was who she really was, and what waited on the other side of that simple act of kindness. A door that would open to more than just shelter. A door to legacy, purpose, and a billion-dollar surprise that would shake his entire world. This is not just a story about helping others. It's about how the smallest, quietest yes can echo for generations. Stay with us, because by the end of this story you might just believe in second chances, in unexpected family, and in the life-changing power of compassion. Let's begin. The wind had a cruel edge that evening, the kind that seeps through your coat no matter how tight it's buttoned. Along a cracked sidewalk at the far end of Willow Springs, an elderly woman stood beneath a flickering streetlight, alone, confused, and invisible to everyone rushing by. Cars rolled past. Shoppers clutched bags and hurried home. No one stopped. No one even looked, except for one. 18-year-old Marcus Hayes had just one delivery left before curfew. His late mother's rusted bicycle was barely holding together, but it was all he had to earn his week's rent. One last trip and he'd have just enough to keep a roof over his head. But then he saw her, frail, wrapped in a worn wool coat, turning toward every car as if one might carry her home. Her lips moved, murmuring something about Route 14 and Willow Lane, but nothing around matched. Marcus hesitated. Time was slipping away, and so was his chance to stay off the street. But when she looked up, eyes cloudy yet desperate, he knew. He approached gently. "Ma'am, do you need help?" Her answer came like a cracked whisper. "I think I missed the bus. Or maybe it missed me." Marcus smiled softly and offered his hand. In that moment, two lives quietly changed course. Marcus Hayes had always lived quietly in the shadows of Willow Springs, doing just enough to survive but never enough to truly rest. At 18, with no parents, no siblings, and no safety net, he delivered packages on a rusted bicycle that once belonged to his late mother. That evening, with temperatures dipping below 40 degrees Fahrenheit and frost beginning to form along the gutters, Marcus had one final delivery to make. If he made it before 8 p.m., he'd earn the $15 he needed to keep his spot in the rented room he called home. If he missed it, the landlord had made it clear. The key would stop working by morning. As he stopped at a corner to sip from his dented water bottle, something caught his eye. An old woman, wrapped in a faded beige coat and clutching a leather purse, stood by the abandoned bus stop. Her silver hair poked out from beneath a knitted cap, and her hands trembled with every passing gust of wind. She wasn't just waiting. She looked lost. She stepped forward toward the curb, then shuffled back, confusion thick in her gaze. Marcus felt the seconds ticking away like thunder in his chest. He couldn't afford to stop. Not tonight. But then, the wind shifted and carried her voice toward him. Thin, uncertain. "Willow Lane, bus 14? Or was it Oak Hill?" The words tumbled like leaves caught in a storm. No one else seemed to hear, but Marcus did. He walked toward her, guiding his bike by the handlebars. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said gently. "Are you all right?" Her eyes met his with a flicker of relief. "I think I missed the bus. Or maybe it forgot me," she said with a soft laugh, fragile and almost apologetic. She had no phone, no address written down, only a pendant hanging around her neck. Marcus leaned in, squinting in the dim light. Engraved on the back of the charm was a name and an address. Eleanor Rose, 132, Oak Hill Road, North End. Marcus knew Oak Hill. It was nearly 12 miles away, most of it uphill. A 2-hour ride on a good day. But Eleanor was someone's mother, someone's grandmother. And tonight, she had no one but him. He tied his scarf around the rear seat of his bike and gently helped her on. Wrapping his own coat around her frail shoulders, he said with a smile, "We'll go slow, ma'am, but we'll get you home." Eleanor chuckled. You remind me of my grandson. Always scuffed shoes, always stubborn. The trip was brutal. The cold bit at his fingers, and the uphill roads turned his legs to fire. At one point, he spent his last dollar to buy her a hot cup of tea. She insisted he take the first sip. When they finally arrived at 132 Oak Hill just before 9:30 p.m., a man in a robe burst out of the house, his eyes filling with tears. "Miss Eleanor, we thought we'd lost you." The man turned to Marcus, gripping his hand. "Son, you brought her home. Offered food, warmth, even a ride back." Marcus declined with a polite shake of the head. "I just wanted to make sure she was safe." He scribbled his number on an old receipt, handed it to the man, and rode into the dark night, unaware that though his bed was gone, something far greater had just begun. The ride back into town was colder than Marcus expected. The warmth from the gas station tea had long since faded from his hands, and every turn of the pedals sent tremors through his stiff knuckles. The bicycle's rusty chains squeaked louder now, echoing through the quiet streets as he coasted down the last hill toward the boarding house. A narrow two-story building with peeling paint and a porch light that hadn't worked in years. He reached into his jacket for the key, but his fingers brushed only fabric. He checked his pants pockets, then the side pouch of his delivery bag. Still nothing. A chill deeper than the night air crept down his spine. He looked up and saw what he feared. A small plastic bag of his belongings. Folded clothes, a towel, and a cracked charger. Neatly tied and left on the stoop. Taped to the door was a piece of paper with 3 words in thick black marker. "Past due." Locked. Marcus stood there for a long moment, his breath forming clouds in the air. He didn't shout, didn't cry. Instead, he turned slowly, pushing his bike back into the night. The only place that came to mind was Johnson's Market, a small corner store where Mr. Johnson, a gruff but kind-hearted man in his 60s, sometimes let him help unload shipments in exchange for stale bread or a few dollars. By the time he arrived behind the store, it was nearly midnight. He knocked gently on the back door. A light flicked on. A few seconds later, the door creaked open. Mr. Johnson, wrapped in a plaid robe, looked him over. Wet shoes, red hands, tired eyes, and sighed through his nose. "Didn't make rent, huh?" Marcus nodded. The old man stepped aside. "Storeroom's dry. Cots in the corner. Don't touch the wine crates. And don't freeze to death." It wasn't much. Cardboard boxes, dusty shelves, the metallic groan of a barely working radiator. But to Marcus, it felt like a miracle. He murmured, "Thank you," then curled up under a thin blanket and let himself exhale for the first time all day. For the first time in weeks, sleep came easily. And in a quiet mansion miles away, Eleanor Rose stood in her kitchen, wide awake. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the wool coat she had worn that night. In the pocket, she'd found the crumpled receipt with a phone number written in uneven blue ink. Marcus's. Her eyes lingered on the digits, then drifted to the silver pendant that still hung around her neck. "He brought me home," she whispered to herself, the words warming the room more than the heater ever could. Outside, the wind howled softly against the windows of both buildings, the estate and the storeroom. But in their own quiet ways, both hearts slept lighter that night. Because kindness, especially the kind offered freely and without expectation, never truly disappears. It plants something in the world, something that grows. The sun had barely risen when Marcus woke to the soft creaks of Johnson's Market. The storeroom around him smelled faintly of cardboard and citrus, and the old radiator clanged like it resented having to work. He rubbed his eyes, folded the thin blanket, and began sweeping without being asked. In the front of the store, Mr. Johnson was already brewing coffee with the silent efficiency of someone who found peace in routine. When he saw Marcus, he gave a quiet grunt and pushed a banana and a lukewarm cup of coffee across the counter. No words, just a nod the kind older men gave when they saw someone trying their best. Marcus accepted them with a soft thank you, peeling the banana slowly as he gazed out the smudged window. The street outside was waking up. Breath clouds from car exhausts, kids with oversized backpacks trudging to school, and the occasional dog barking at nothing in particular. Then, Like a dream stepping into reality. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb. It didn't belong on this street. Its engine barely made a sound. Its windows were tinted too dark. And the man who stepped out looked like he belonged on a magazine cover. Not in a town where folks paid for groceries and change. Tall, polished shoes, tailored coat. He paused, glanced at a small slip of paper, then looked directly into the window, and locked eyes with Marcus. The bell above the market door chimed gently as the man entered. "Excuse me," he said, his voice smooth but deliberate. "I'm looking for someone named Marcus." Marcus straightened. "That's me. My name is Charles," the man said, stepping forward with calm precision. "Miss Eleanor Rose sent me. She asked me to find you." Mr. Johnson paused, his cup midair. Marcus blinked. "She remembers?" "Everything," Charles nodded. "She remembers the ride, your kindness, how you made her feel safe when she was lost. And she wants to thank you. In person." The words hit Marcus like a wave. He remembered scribbling his number on the back of that receipt, half out of instinct, half out of hope. He never imagined she would call. Charles held the door open. "She's waiting if you're willing." Marcus hesitated. That mansion on Oak Hill. It wasn't his world. He didn't belong in chandeliers and parlor rooms. He was just a kid with a rusted bike and no place to sleep. "I just wanted to make sure she got home safe," he said quietly. "And you did," Charles replied. "But Miss Rose believes you gave her something more. A sense of self. A reason to remember. She'd like to tell you that." Marcus looked over at Mr. Johnson, who gave him a small shrug and muttered, "Go on. Your cot'll still be here if you need it." So Marcus took a breath and stepped outside. As the car pulled away from the curb, the streets blurred behind them. And though Marcus had no idea what lay ahead, something told him the door he just opened wasn't one of charity. It was the beginning of something far deeper, something earned. The drive back to Oak Hill in daylight felt surreal to Marcus. What had looked like shadows and uncertainty the night before now appeared softer. Just sleepy trees and winding roads bathed in late morning sun. The world didn't seem quite so heavy under daylight, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was crossing into a place that didn't belong to him. When they reached the white brick estate, the house didn't feel intimidating like it had in the dark. It felt quieter, like it had been waiting for something, or someone. Charles led him through a side entrance into a sunroom filled with soft light, wooden shelves lined with worn books, and the gentle scent of lavender in the air. There, seated by the window with a wool shawl across her shoulders and her silver hair neatly pinned, was Eleanor Rose. Not the confused, wandering woman he had helped just the night before, but someone grounded and clear-eyed. Someone remembering. As soon as she saw Marcus, her face lit up like a church bell at sunrise. "You," she whispered, her voice breaking just enough to let the truth shine through. "You brought me home." He didn't know what to say. The words felt too big, too heavy for what he thought had been such a simple act. But Eleanor didn't let him look away. She reached forward, gently clasping his hands in her own. "I remember everything, every street we passed. The warmth of your jacket, the way you answered me like I mattered, even when I asked the same question 5 times. You didn't treat me like a burden. You made me feel safe." Marcus lowered his eyes, unsure how to carry the weight of her gratitude. "I don't know your story," Eleanor continued softly, "but I'd like to. And if you don't have a place to stay, I'd be honored to offer you one. Not just for a night, for longer if you'd let me. This house has too many rooms and not enough kindness." The offer landed like thunder in a quiet field. Marcus took a half step back, shaking his head. "Ma'am, I didn't help you because I wanted anything in return. I just couldn't leave you there. That's all." Eleanor smiled, her eyes moist. "And that," she said, "is exactly why I want you to stay." The room went quiet again. No noise but the ticking of a distant wall clock and the soft rustle of wind through ivy-covered windows. And in that stillness, something shifted. Marcus, who had spent the last 2 winters trying to survive one day at a time, suddenly found himself standing in a home filled with warmth. A stranger offering not pity, but trust. a second chance. He didn't say yes, not yet, but he also didn't say no. Because sometimes the smallest acts, the ones that go unnoticed by the world, plant the seeds of something far bigger. And in that moment, under that roof, Marcus realized what he'd really done wasn't just take someone home. He'd reminded them both what it meant to be seen. The next morning arrived quietly, wrapped in that pale silver light only winter skies can offer, hesitant, as if the world itself wasn't quite sure it was ready to begin again. Marcus woke early just like always. Despite the paper-thin blanket and the humming radiator that only half worked, he had slept more soundly than he had in weeks. Maybe it was Eleanor's voice from the night before still echoing in his mind. Or maybe it was something deeper, something about finally being seen. He swept the stockroom floors of Johnson's Market with methodical care, lining up crates and stacking boxes, though his thoughts drifted constantly to the note she'd passed to him. A handwritten offer. Not a contract. Not charity. Just a gentle invitation to belong somewhere. That alone was almost too much to hold. And then, as if fate knew he needed one more nudge, the bell above the front door rang. But this wasn't the sharp jingle of impatient customers. This was soft, measured, familiar. He looked up from behind the counter, and there she was again. Eleanor Rose. No driver this time. No fur-lined coat. Just a wool shawl neatly draped over her shoulders and a handbag clutched softly in the crook of her arm. She smiled at him the way someone does when they've been waiting all morning just to say one thing. "I hope you don't mind me coming again," she said gently. "I've been thinking about you all night." That probably sounds strange, but I mean it kindly. Marcus wiped his hands on his jeans, unsure whether to brace for conversation or a miracle. She leaned in slightly, her voice low, almost conspiratorial. "This house I live in," she began, "has been too quiet for too long. I used to tell myself it was peaceful. But now I think it's just been empty. Missing something." She paused, then added, "Someone." From her handbag, she pulled a folded sheet of stationery, lined with careful cursive, the kind that carried decades of habit and grace. "This," she said, placing it on the counter, "isn't a deal. It's not a job. It's simply a place to land until you decide where to go next. You wouldn't owe me anything. No strings. Just support. I believe in helping good people build good lives." Marcus unfolded the paper slowly. It was an offer. A room at the estate, meals, a modest stipend, and at the bottom, written in smaller, almost trembling script, a final line. "And if school is still in your heart, we'll find a way back for you." He didn't speak right away. His fingers gripped the note like it might disappear. No one had ever offered him anything like this before. Not without conditions, not without judgment. He finally looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "You really mean it?" Eleanor's voice trembled, not from age, but emotion. "I wouldn't have come here if I didn't." And in that moment, something broke open in him. Not with noise, but like thawed ground after a long frost. It wasn't just the warmth of the offer. It was the warmth of being wanted. Not for what he could do, but simply for who he was. That afternoon, the black sedan returned. Not with grandeur, but with quiet familiarity. Charles, the kind driver from before, stepped out and gave Marcus a gentle nod. This time, the invitation wasn't laced with uncertainty. It was waiting. Marcus packed his life into a single backpack. A few shirts, a frayed hoodie, a cracked phone charger, and the torn receipt with Eleanor Rose's address still smudged in blue ink. Mr. Johnson stood by the back door of the market, holding a paper sack filled with sandwiches and a muttered, "About time." Marcus chuckled, his throat tight, and stepped into the back seat of a car that smelled faintly of pine wood and possibility. The drive to Oak Hill felt entirely different by day. The trees that had loomed like shadows under moonlight now stood golden in the afternoon sun. The hills didn't seem so steep. The road didn't feel so long. And the house, Eleanor's house, didn't seem like a stranger's mansion anymore. It looked like a place where something new might begin. When they arrived, Charles didn't lead Marcus through the front. He guided him around to the side entrance, a quieter way in, lined with blooming winter jasmine and a rusted swing that creaked in the breeze. Inside, the estate was not as grand as Marcus had imagined. It was warm, quiet, lived in. The walls held the smell of old books and dried lavender. A clock ticked from somewhere down the hall, not loud, just steady, like breath. Eleanor met him in the sunroom, her shawl wrapped gently around her shoulders. This time, she didn't look like a woman who had once been lost. She looked like someone who had found a reason to open her doors again. "I've made up the guest room," she said, almost apologetically. "Though I suppose we'll have to give it a real name soon. You'll be staying longer than a guest." Marcus stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the light as he took in the rows of bookshelves, the worn armchairs, the pictures on the wall. It didn't feel like charity. Felt like being allowed to exhale. Days passed, then weeks. Marcus began to fall into a rhythm. Breakfast in the greenhouse, afternoons reading or sketching ideas Eleanor insisted he write down. Quiet evenings filled with tea and conversation about everything from poetry to public housing reform. Eleanor never lectured. She listened, and together they imagined something new. They called it the Willow Light Fund, named after the bus stop where Eleanor had stood that cold night, and the street she couldn't quite remember but would never forget. Its mission was simple: to help those like Marcus, young people with potential but no platform, and elders like Eleanor who had slipped through the cracks of a noisy world. With Eleanor's resources and Marcus's lived experience, the foundation began its work. They opened a youth center, rehabilitated an old library, started a meal program for seniors, and with every check Eleanor signed, she whispered to herself, "Let this help someone feel seen." Marcus stayed, not because he had to, but because he'd found something no money could buy: purpose, belonging, and the gentle truth that home isn't always where you sleep. Sometimes, home is the place where someone believed in you first. Mornings at the estate had a different kind of silence, one that didn't ache, but welcomed. Sunlight filtered through lace curtains, warming the corners of the old rooms. Marcus found himself rising earlier than he ever had at the boarding house, not because he had to, but because something in his chest told him the day might offer something worth showing up for. Eleanor Rose had kept her word. She didn't treat him like a case or a project or a boy she had to fix. She treated him like someone whose story was still being written, and she was simply offering a place for the next chapter to unfold. Within a few weeks, Marcus had helped set up the first community program through the Willow Light Fund, a weekend tutoring service for underprivileged youth, many of whom reminded him of himself. He taught math, helped with college essays, and even led a workshop on bicycle repair, using the same rusted frame that had once carried Eleanor home. The foundation soon became more than a charity. It became a bridge between generations, between past and possibility. Eleanor would often join Marcus in the community hall, wearing her soft shawl and sipping chamomile tea while watching the kids learn. She'd smile as Marcus gently corrected a student's grammar or taught them how to use a wrench. "You're good with people," she told him one afternoon. "That's not something you learn from books. That's something you're born with or earn the hard way." The bond between them deepened, not by dramatic gestures, but through small, consistent kindnesses. Eleanor would ask Marcus what he missed most about his mother. He'd say her voice when she hummed Motown in the kitchen. In turn, Eleanor spoke of her grandson, how he died too young, but had the same quiet strength Marcus carried now. One evening, after a long day at the youth center, Marcus found a small box waiting for him on his bed. Inside was a photo, Eleanor and her grandson, laughing on a beach, wind in their hair. Tucked beside it was a note in her graceful, slightly shaking script. "I lost him before I could tell him how proud I was. I won't make that mistake again." Marcus didn't cry, not exactly, but he sat on the edge of his bed for a long while, the photo in his hand, the note pressed to his heart. For the first time in years, the ache of being unseen didn't feel so sharp. Someone had noticed, and not just noticed, but chosen to stand beside him. They say acts of kindness ripple outward like stones in water. What Eleanor had done for Marcus and what Marcus had done for her had become more than a ripple. It was a current, moving through the town, through their lives, and into places neither had expected. Because sometimes, the greatest change doesn't come from grand speeches or large checks. Sometimes it comes from a scarf wrapped around an old woman's shoulders, a rusty bicycle pedaling uphill, a boy who stopped when everyone else passed by, and a woman who remembered. As autumn rolled in and the leaves turned to gold, Marcus began to settle into something he'd never truly known before: stability. Every morning, he walked through Eleanor's garden, now blooming again with chrysanthemums and lavender, and every afternoon, he returned to the youth center that bore his quiet touch. It was there, standing beside a whiteboard teaching algebra to a struggling high schooler, that Marcus suddenly understood. This wasn't just a second chance. It was a life, one with purpose. He never asked for recognition, and Eleanor never treated him like he owed her anything. They built something together, each day stacking small acts of trust like bricks in a foundation that would hold not just them, but others who'd been forgotten, ignored, or left behind. And on the rare occasion he passed that old bus stop, Marcus would pause, not to remember what was lost, but to honor what had been found. Sometimes the smallest choice, like stopping to help a stranger, can alter the entire course of your life. Kindness doesn't just restore others. It restores you. In a world rushing past, be the one who slows down, who listens, who acts. Because someone's forever might begin with your yes today. If this story moved you, leave a comment below telling us a moment when someone's kindness changed your path. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a story that speaks to the heart. Let's keep spreading light, one story at a time.